We know there is an upcoming general election. Everyone knows it. It's just a matter of when. And honestly, that would be the $60 million question that if I could answer, wow, you know, but it's not. We are all predicting, we are all thinking, and everyone who is, currently UK politics is, looking in their crystal balls. I really need to get a crystal ball put up at some point. We are looking in our crystal balls, trying to predict when all this is going to happen. Will it happen next year, or will they eke it out right until January 2025? We don't know. It's a possibility. But when you look at the polls, and you are looking at polling intention, you are seeing the Tories on 20 to 19%. That is not good. That is not good at all. And we have Tories from every single aspect of the party up and down the country panicking. They know the Armageddon is coming and they are running for shelter. But there's no shelter to be found. And instead, what they are left with is is essentially a leadership contest, which I think ultimately is going to be fought by Kimmy Badenoch, Suella Braverman, and probably James Cleverly. Because they're already having it now. But we also have to be careful because there will be a party, and if you look at polling intentions, they are now making hay from this absolute nightmare. And who are we talking about? Well, of course, it's Reform UK. Reform UK's current voting intention in a lot of polls has now gone to 10%. And when you look at the Liberal Democrats, they're on 11%. And remember, in order to wipe out Conservatives, we need good showings for the Lib Dems in many of the Southern Wall seats. So remember, tactical voting. If not, you could let these Reform UK people slip in because they seem to be targeting, a lot of Tory activists to get on their side. And they are now specifically changing tact to go after Tory voters. And we need to pay attention to this fact that they are going to go after these types of people. And if they can make hay from the Tories' catastrophe, we could be in a parliament where you actually have Reform UK MPs in parliament. And certainly, I worry they might target my hometown because my MP, Dan Jarvis, he had about a majority of about 2,000. And who came second? Well, it was the Reform UK candidate. I worry that they are going to heavily target my town come a general election. But we'll see what happens then. And of course, we'll report the news when that happens. But we're going to talk about Reform UK because they are going back to basics. Yes, they are going all the way back to Brexit. So before we do get into this today, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a rotation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all the people who do help and support the channel that way. So I'm going to go over to The Guardian today because they've got a piece about this, where they talk about Reform UK changing tack. Because this is something we need to pay attention to. It was barely noticed, but last week, the slight tweak last month to the name of the insurgent right-wing party Reform UK sought to resurrect a ghost that once terrified the Conservatives. In future, it is to be known as Reform UK, the Brexit Party. Yes, this I missed as well. Like I say, I was in Zurich last week, so I missed this as well. They have actually rebranded the party name to Reform UK, the Brexit Party. So they know exactly what they are going after because remember, Brexit was sold as this big change moment. And they are going to be selling themselves as, we are the people who will bring change, because we'll tell you what, Brexit was not done properly. Get us in and we will do Brexit properly. We will bring all those fantastic economic freedom and unicorns that you were promised. Which is why, as we've said, we should be very careful of them. So, continues, this explicit move to try and tap into this reservoir of Leave voting nostalgia comes amid the signs that the party which struggled after its co-founder Nigel Farage focused his attention on his broadcasting career, could once again cause real problems for the Tories. Amongst those warnings that the Conservative Party would lose votes to the reform is the former business secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg, who spoke out after the sacking of Suella Braverman as Home Secretary and the appointment of David Cameron as Foreign Secretary. As we said, the right wing and people like Jacob Rees-Mogg are not going to be happy. Remember, David Cameron's ABCs, austerity, Brexit, China. Those are his three big draws that a lot of the other people in the Conservative Party are going to have problems with him being there for. And of course, what's this going to do? Well, Brexit. Remember, David Cameron vastly against Brexit. And as we said, they're not going to be happy. So, YouGov polling also found that voters who supported the Tories in 2019 are more likely to switch to Reform than to Labour. And again, they're holding on to that Brexit nostalgia. These people who voted for Leave, who are like true believers in this, they are still, or they've been convinced by Reform and Nigel Farage and all these other Leavers who have said, look, we haven't Brexited properly. They've bought into that propaganda. And here's the thing, it was always going to go this way. There is no, quote, right way to leave. Because what they want is an even harder percent of Brexit that we've even got now. They want to go even harder on this. Remember, Jacob Rees-Mogg, massive advocate of saying, well, we should put all tariffs to zero. Because, yes, that's going to be a wonderful idea, Jacob, isn't it? There have also been suggestions that also these voter switches could cost Rishi Sunak's party at the recent by-elections. So that's what they're also trying to say as well. The reason why we've lost these by-elections is not because voters switched over to Labour, it's because they've switched over to Reform. Again, seems to be a lot of coping, but there is also a lot of evidence to suggest that those Tory voters have gone to Reform UK. How big that switch is, we're not 100% really sure. Will this be applicable to a general election? Well, we'll have to see what happens. Like I say, polling, they are 1 point behind from what I have seen in some polls, behind the Lib Dems. So that should be a very, very big warning sign. But more alarmingly for Downing Street, the average of 4 polls since the reshuffle has now placed the Tory at 20%. This is 6 points lower than a week before, with Conservative supporters now shifting to Reform. Amid the return of the former PM who opposed Brexit, Reform's average score rose from 7 to 10% in a week. They are 1 point behind the Lib Dems. We should be careful on this. Really, really careful on this. In the coming weeks, Reform will announce hundreds of candidates as it seeks to build on the momentum behind its stated desire to destroy the Conservatives. And oh boy, will they ever. Richard Trice has openly said he is going to contest every single Conservative seat. They are going after the Conservatives. They know there is big possibilities in this. And that's what they are going for. And this is the other thing that could bring it up. Even at the cost of splitting the right-wing vote, Reform's leader, Richard Trice, insists that every Tory candidate will face a Reform opponent in the general election, dismissing any return of the 2019 deal in which the Brexit Party, as Reform was then called, stood aside for more than 300 Tory-held seats after Boris Johnson gave commitments on a hard Brexit. They ain't going to be convinced this time. There's going to be no deal. This is going to be a massive vote split, which is good, which is what we want. But this worries me that there may be a couple of seats where they might manage to slip in. And like I say, in a general election, could happen. Now, you're not going to get loads, but I think you could see between 7. I don't think you're maybe going to get more than that, maybe even 5. But if they're in there in Parliament and they start causing a ruckus, then they're going to get more attention. They're going to get more, street cred. And a general election after that, who knows? Like I say, this is what these parties tend to do, unfortunately. It seems that, as we've said before, the populism in the Conservative Party has now run out of road, but Reform UK is more than willing to start laying some more pavement. So, it is a threat to the Conservatives' MPs, particularly those in the Red Wall. And we've got an article that we'll be doing later for Conservative Home from one of those particular Red Wall Conservative MPs. Highly, highly amusing, but we'll get to that later. So particularly those in the Red Wall seats are all too aware, and of course, one that is already now feeding into internal debates about the direction that Sunak is taking them. Miriam Cates, again, the Conservative MP next door for Penistone and Stocksbridge, has now regarded as a rising star on the right of the party, told The Guardian that her party should welcome the pressure from Reform UK to make sure that it returns to what she views as the principle behind the Tories winning the 2019 voter coalition. You ain't going to get this voter coalition. Brexit's done. You can't really run on that. Boris Johnson, not going to be a factor. Levelling up and all these promises of yes, I'm not going to leave you behind, which was heavily linked to, of course, Boris Johnson. Well, you've got a video of Rishi Sunak telling voters down south he took money from poor leaders, from poor areas, and then gave it to the richer ones. Not only that, the promises of levelling up have not come to fruition. Why are they going to believe you again on any of these things? So this idea of this coalition is going to come together again? No, absolutely not. People like Miriam Cates that believe that coalition can be rebuilt. It was very, very much a once-in-a-lifetime thing with all the ingredients right there. It's not going to be repeated twice. Cates also said that the polling that we have seen very accurately reflects what I and others are seeing on the doorsteps, which is that while there is no love for Labour's Keir Starmer, people voted for a Conservative Party and want a Conservative government. Not 100% true, but again, we'll leave that for another time, maybe. And of course, every single Red Wall Conservative MP would rather there was no Reform candidate standing against us. One aspect of the stronger than expected performances by Reform UK in this polling and by-elections, particularly in Tamworth, where it won 5.4% of the vote, has been that they were able to achieve this without Farage. While the former UKIP leader is listed on Companies House as its director, pollsters have suggested that the real threat to the Tories would only emerge if he returned as leader. We'll see. Might that happen? I think, as we know, Farage is currently in I'm a Celebrity. I think he's trying to reform his image because I think he wants to rejoin the Conservative Party. And I think all that is part of that move to allow him to be reformed and be redeemed in the eyes of Conservatives. Oh, look, Farage is no longer, it's not the UKIP Farage, this is Tory Farage. We're welcoming him back into the fold. I think that's what's happening. There was also speculation that Farage, whose profile stands to be boosted, as we said, from participation in this year's I'm a Celebrity, could throw his lot in with the Conservatives, with rumours boosted by his appearance at this year's Tory conference. Again, as we said in my short video about this is done to reform his image. If they get desperate, we've made an entire video about this before. If they get desperate, will the Tories do a deal with the devil? And I think they will do a deal with Nigel Farage very, very gladly. Then what happens to Reform UK? We'll see what happens. But Richard Trice, who now heads Reform, on Saturday said the reality is that he was on an undercover mission in plain sight at the Tory conference, but he's confirmed that Reform is the party that he is committed to. And until now, a Farage return was seen as a necessity requisite for the big donors to back Reform. Those latest accounts show to be of relatively modest means. And that's the big thing. If Farage does return after I'm a Celebrity, which he might do, then all those big donors who backed UKIP would now start backing Reform. And there's a lot of, shall we say, money from America. The dark money from America that we've talked about quite a bit might come trickling into Reform's coffers as well. It's a possibility. But again, if Farage returns to Reform UK to lead it, oh boy, that's going to turn a general election into something very interesting. I will tell you that now. Because we've been having debates, and I'll tell you now, if you put Rishi, Starmer, Farage on a debate stage, Farage would just run riot over both of them. He absolutely would. And even if there were other parties there, like the Green Party and Lib Dems, Farage would just run riot all over them. Because that's what he's trained to do. Sunak has no personality. He can't fight back against that. Starmer, I worry about his debate performance. He's given a lot of good speeches in the past and has shown that he can, trade barbs as good as anyone else at PMQs. But debates are an altogether different beast. And he hasn't really shown if he is ready for that. That I worry about. I hope he's being prepared. But honestly, I think he would be prepared for these debates now. So it continues. Of course, it remains to be seen whether these by-election performances can encourage these wealthy backers to dip into their wallets for a party that lacks the periodic boosts, as did the pro-Brexit predecessors, who were able to enjoy, ironically, from the European elections. Pardon me. Below this political radar, nevertheless, has been a steady trickle of disillusioned Conservative activists that continue to defect to Reform. And this is something I said, because this happened in Barnsley. You saw our local town councillors who were originally with Reform switched to the Conservatives, and they've now switched back to Reform. I've said they should have to stand for election every single time they do that. I don't think it's fair. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it's a warning sign, definitely, for things to come. The Conservative activists continue to defect to Reform, which is only about a quarter of its general election candidates that will have been Brexit Party veterans. Those include Kabir Kahir, a financial services worker who left the Tory party that he regards as having drifted to the left. This is so hilarious when I see people on the left who say, "Oh, you don't understand the Labour Party's just like it's just the Conservative Party now." But you go and you get guys like this who are like, "Oh, they've drifted. The Tory party has drifted too far left." yeah, there's a lot of people out there who I still today do not really understand politics when they say stuff like that. But anyway, um, he regards as having drifted too far to the left on issues ranging from taxes and public spending to net zero. Now he is Reform's spokesperson for the Mid Norfolk and says that there is over 220 plus potential majorities for his sitting MP, George Freeman, the science minister, and is no longer a guarantee of security. Keir said that after what I saw in the Mid Bedfordshire election, where I did a lot of campaigning with our candidate, this is not a seat where the Conservatives are safe. Even if we can give them a scare, it will be good for me. But I honestly can't tell you what the difference is between Sunak or Starmer in Downing Street. Starmer's going to be wildly different. I can tell you that now. But there you go. Yeah, Reform UK. We've got to keep an eye on them. To be honest, we really do, and we really should be keeping an eye on them and what they do and what they say. It could be a possibility in the next election if the Tory Armageddon predictions become true. Maybe a couple of candidates slip in. Maybe you do see a couple of Reform UK MPs. But we'll see what happens. The Tories, as we said, Rishi Sunak might be so desperate he does a deal with Farage and welcomes him into the party. We'll see what happens after I'm a Celebrity's all done and over. We'll see if Farage, if Farage manages to keep his mouth shut and doesn't cause, any controversy, he might come out of it with a bigger boost to his profile. And then, of course, gets returned, welcome back into the fold by Rishi Sunak. Who knows what could happen? Maybe he goes back and becomes leader of Reform. But this is something that we should be paying attention to. Be paying big attention to. I'll tell you that now. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.